We'll call this committee of the whole meeting to order on February 11th, 2025 at 6:11 PM. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anybody like to speak under public participation this evening? Okay, for the record, there's no public participation. We will start with item number 4, request a permit, Lincoln Rail Splitter Antique Auto Club, Cars and Coffee, closure of 100 block of South Kickapoo Street between Broadway and Pulaski Street from 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. for the following dates are April 26th, May 24th, June 28th, July 26th, and September 27th.
Consent agenda.
Place this item on the consent agenda? Okay, we'll place that item on the consent agenda. Next item up is item number 5, ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for participation in the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network. Mr. Landers?
Yes, we've actually been a member of IPW Man since April of 2018. They decided that they need to make some changes and update to the intergovernmental agreement. And then also they worked on their policies and procedures a little bit, as the memo says. So that's asking for this to be approved, placed on the agenda.
Discussion? Ms. Rolfs?
Yeah, they made some minor changes in the intergovernmental agreement. It's listed on the memo, the changes that they made.
Any other questions? Place this on the regular agenda? Okay, we'll place item number 5 on the regular agenda. Okay, next up is item number 6, ground-mounted solar regulations. Mr. Hoblet, you want to take this, or Mr. Bateman? Mr. Bateman?
So in searching for different solar ordinances, I wanted to kind of stay local because I didn't want to compare us to cities far away. So I did find one in Peoria, Illinois, for commercial ground-mounted solar. That is what's in your packet. So tonight I'm hoping, if you haven't read it, please go home and take time to read it. I do know between myself and Wes, we have some suggestions that we would like to change in the language. I know Wes brought up fencing. The one in Peoria, I believe it or not, calls for 20-foot tall fences. Yeah, it's up there. My personal belief is not any higher than the panels, or we need to come to a not to exceed height. Again, I'm not trying to do this to kill ground-mounted solar, but I think we need to have more control over it. I do would like to see it any size. I know Wes currently has in the ordinance it's half an acre. I would like to make it any size. Part of the reason I'd like to do that is I found out today that there is possible solar on Woodlawn Road. I told the people I wouldn't divulge the address, but this is a business that's wanting to put solar behind their business. It would be visible from Woodlawn Road as you drive down the road. So they reached out to me to see what kind of changes we were going to make. I told him my personal beliefs was fencing, aesthetics. On the fencing part, I would like to see language redo the height, and then I would like to see some kind of language that addresses aesthetics. When I say that, what I'm meaning is it's not what's behind the fence, it's whether I could see it easily. So I'm thinking things like I call them shadow box fences, where it's from an angle you can see in, or some kind of chain link with the mayor and I discussed. They've got chain link with like slats you can put in it so you're not seeing through it. This person that I talked to said they would be fine with that kind of stuff as long as it didn't exceed the height where it shades the solar panels. So those are some of the kind of things that we need to address. There may be whole paragraphs that we could strike from that. I just wanted to give the council the entire ordinance as it is in place in Peoria, and we could whittle it down and change it to meet our needs. So if anybody has any questions for myself or Wes or John, feel free to do so. But tonight I'm just saying this is what I'd like you to go home and read, think about it, and bring forth something that we can put on the next cow for a possible vote.
Alderman Parrott.
Kevin, in just your quick research, you just did Peoria?
Well, I looked for other ones, but I wanted to whittle it down to something that's closer to home. I started out with just ground-mounted solar ordinances. There was some in Iowa, Michigan, Indiana. I was just trying to whittle it down to something closer to home. I found the one in Peoria, read it, thought there might be some changes we could do, so I sent that to John, and Wes got a copy, so we kind of trying to figure out what changes we want to make first.
Just another quick question. So in your reading it, do you recall if any of those ground mounted that were more than one, let's just say, they're going to do a whole, maybe a quarter of an acre or whatever the situation is, was it around residential properties there in Peoria?
Well, in their ordinance, there is specific language that I can't say it's based toward residential, but in my, I don't know how Wes reads it, but in my reading, it is based toward that because it takes in effect glare, height, those kind of things. So, so to me, that sounds like they're basing it toward being next to residential because they're talking about glare for when the sun's hitting it and stuff like that. Those are the kind of language I'd like to keep in there. But, obviously the fence was the most egregious one. I mean, it's a pretty tall fence.
So Wes, then with the ordinance from Peoria, is that how you're going to look at it and bring something forward to us? Or I don't understand. We have this thing from Peoria, but how's that going to be implemented into what
Well, actually,
might come to us?
what John and Kevin and I talked to about read ours first. I mean, if you haven't, you all voted on it and approved it, but read ours first. And then take into account any other ones, Peoria or wherever else you might research and see. Most of what you see is we have some sort of language regarding it. It might be different. Fence heights, and I think ours is max of 8 foot right now. It's required, but a max of 8 foot. Something like Peoria, their max is 25 foot. That's, in my opinion, obscene. A 25-foot fence anywhere is, I don't even know if you can get it, first off, but compare them. Read ours, read Peoria, go look at other ones, and just see what, if any, changes you want made. Like their decommissioning process in theirs, I think ours is a lot more stringent, the one we currently have, which is part of the special use permit, which we talked about not doing anything regarding a half acre or less, all of them. Just ground mount in general has to have a special use. So then you go through the process like we talked about of the plan commission. You all get final vote on it. That's just a recommendation to the council. So, but I would ask you to read ours, obviously, and then, do some research on other communities or other ordinances and see what you may or may not want added or amended.
Thank you.
Alderman Bateman.
Yeah, I guess I should have clarified. I'm not wanting to wad ours up and throw it away. I was just trying to find others, and we could take the best of what we find. If you guys do your research and you find one, Kankakee or somewhere that you like the language they have in theirs, feel free to bring that up or send an email out. Send an email to Wes, put myself on it. We'll look it over real quick. We're both real good at answering emails even at night, and just trying to come up with some kind of language. And maybe we're not doing it in 2 cows, but there is one out there. I'm hoping that Wes, it's on hold until we get this worked out. That's what I told the gentleman today. Is ours is good, and our decommissioning is good, but ours doesn't talk about glare, and ours does, so I'm just trying to compare what other people have and make ours fit this community better with what we've been tasked to do and have more control over ground mounted solar. So like I said, the one thing, the two things that I'm really concerned about is aesthetics, what it looks like from public view, and any size. This one that I talked to today is nowhere near a half acre, but it's ground mounted solar. So that's why I want to make it to where ground mounted solar comes before the council, and we work on language to other things that would make it fit for the community.
Alderwoman Rolfs.
I know we talked a little bit, I think last week, about how many of the solar farms we would have within the city. Do we have any stipulation as to how many we would have in the city or could have in the city?
I don't believe there's a limit in the ordinance.
These are businesses that are wanting to do it. Not this. The one that contacted me is not like what's on Limit Street, which is also a business, or the solar farm that the city's trying to build down on the end of Kickapoo Street. These are businesses wanting to take advantage of solar to lower their power bills. So that's why I think, this particular business, when they talked to me, I'm like, where in the world are you going to put it? And then he named it, and I'm like, yep, you're right. There's a small area back there, and they're thinking they could cut their power bill by a quarter, so they were going to cover it with a solar panel. So that's what I'm afraid of is, let's face it, Walmart's got all that grass in front next to the car wash. They could put solar panels there. I know they got them on the roof already, or other businesses or nursing homes or whatever that has large expanses of green area that want to take advantage of this. So that's why I'm wanting to bring this forward, so we don't end up with what's behind the Illini Bank building. They took advantage of the green area they owned, and that's what we got. Chain link fence and a bunch of solar panels.
Alderwoman McClellan.
So, Wes, what is the typical height of the ones that we have now around town when they're fully extended?
Fully extended, the ones we have currently in town are non-tilt, so they're all fixed. Yeah, the ones you see like on 55, those abstract towards, those are tilting throughout the day. The ones we currently have are non-tilt. From what I've found, anywhere from 7 to at the most probably 12 foot full tilt.
Alderman Parrott.
Just another quick question. So if there was an ordinance on glare, is there an engineer that determines what that glare, is?
It's in our ordinance.
It's in our ordinance. How's
Nowadays, they're actually engineered. The panels themselves are created non-glare. I suppose it would take a complaint first. At that point, you've already got them erected, so there's an issue there. But I haven't personally had any with the ones anywhere complaints or anything of that nature. I've not really heard much of it. The way they're actually created nowadays, they're ideally non-glare. I know that they're technically taking in glare, but I haven't really seen much about that being an issue. So, but we do have there is something in our current ordinance regarding that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so we'll bring that back at a future Cal. Please take a look at what Mr. Bateman has provided. If you have any questions, Mr. Bateman, Mr. Woodhull, or Mr. Hoblet can answer those questions for you. Okay, moving on to item number 7, consideration of adding a deputy fire chief position. Chief Johnson.
Thank you. So, as I put out in the packet, it describes the position almost exactly like the fire chief's position. And the fact is, they will have the same administrative duties as I have. there's so much to do on the administration side that we're getting through the day-to-day stuff and we're meeting the immediate needs, but we're having a hard time spending much time focusing on future needs. So this will be the first time, let's see, in May we'll have a full staff of 21. It'll be the first time that they've all been off minimum manning since 2003, I believe. Quarter of the department's got less than a year on the job. So we're trying to identify areas that we can make the department better and function better, and this is just one of them. I come into work every day at least 2 hours early. I do work out for part of that time. I come in on the weekends, on my vacation days. There's always an immediate need that has to be met. So if we had a deputy chief in place, that would free me up to do other administrative things, basically. And again, it is an expensive position. There's no question about that. So that's why I want to present it to you, see what you all come up with. But that's what I came up with. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So with the explanation that was in the packet, we have the fire chief, then we have 3.
Correct. So the way that the language is written right now, you have a fire chief and you have 3 assistant chiefs, but the assistant chiefs do no administration duties. They are operational firefighters. They work 24/48. They do take on projects when I ask, but so does every member of the department, and that's what's been happening. There's so much that's being delegated daily just to get it done that it's just a lot. So, but that's the reason I put that in there, to clarify that yes, we have assistant chiefs, but they do not assist me. They are line operational firefighters.
So one of these assistants wouldn't be a deputy fire chief. The deputy fire is actually a separate position, a new hire or something like that.
Correct.
And the cost is around $94,000 some $100.
Well, that's
if I
exactly
calculated
correct.
what you were saying in your description of what it would cost.
That's exactly correct. We would take someone from the assistant chief position or captain's position, move them to the 40-hour work week, doing administrative duties, and then that would require us to hire another new firefighter. That's why I put the start date. I'd like to have it September 1st, 2025. If the council decides to do it. And the reason for that is that's when the next academy class starts.
So is this a budgetary discussion also?
Yes.
Well, city treasurer,
Well,
as far as putting an additional $94,000 into what will be budgeted?
yes,
Are there any
if-
questions we should have about that?
well, if it is the will of the council to create this position, we would build that into the salary and the insurance cost too, because this person would of course be entitled to health insurance, which is the other component in it that we would have to figure into the budget. So we would do that if that's what.
So this would also impact our, our pension fund. As well.
It would be, the fire pension fund, which is a consolidated fund, which is not the same as the IMRF, which has a compulsory component to it, where the city says this is your percentage of salary that you're going to pay in. So this would go into the fire pension fund. So it'd be figured into the actuarial evaluations for that when they, which.
Now, is that a figure that we can get, I mean, between
Well-
the pension fund, the salary and the benefits?
Yeah, the salary and the benefits, the pension part of it is more difficult because it's calculated based on everybody in the fund, everybody who's a annuitant and is receiving the benefits at this point in time, in addition to everybody who's currently an active firefighter and is paying into it. So it's hard to isolate that down to one person because.
But it would be closer to around 100,000 maybe by the time.
With the salary, with the insurance, because the insurance is in there. It'd probably be well under that, depending on what happens with the health insurance in the future.
Okay, Alderwoman O'Donohue and then Alderman Parrott.
So would this person be a non-union then employee? So kind of like the deputy chief of police? He
That
would
is-
no longer be a union employee, he'd be a non-union employee?
That is also correct, yeah.
Okay. And it's somebody who's, I mean, according to the breakdown of the qualification, somebody who's been here for 15 plus years. So it's already somebody who is on the staff. So it's already somebody who's making a healthy salary from
Correct.
it. So it's not really going to be so much as adding a new position.
The
Adding a
starting
new
salary
position,
of a
but
new
salary-wise,
firefighter.
it's yes.
Yeah, that would be a drastic difference.
Okay. Okay.
I was gonna say, I was listening to Mrs. Rolfs, and then I'm like thinking, it's not a $94,000 bump in the budget. It's a new firefighter bump in the budget and whatever we bump that person to. So it's not a $100,000 hit to the budget. It's probably gonna be less than half of that.
You're still gonna have the same number of firefighters, aren't you?
No,
No?
you would, whoever takes the position, he would then have to fill that with a new firefighter.
Right.
So that is the
I see
cost
what
of
you
the
mean.
position plus the bump.
Alderman Parrott.
So one of the three are the assistant fire chiefs, they're union, and are they in the contract?
They are not union members.
They're
They are
not
out of
union members.
contract.
And so basically one of the three would most likely become the deputy chief.
They should be offered it first, correct.
And then if one of those take it, is the idea that their administrative duties, those three, would go to the deputy assistant, deputy chief, and then they would relinquish those responsibilities. Since if it's administrative, we haven't had the person before. It seems like they might be able to, unless those are on different shifts and stuff like that, and that would be the issue.
That is the issue. The assistant chiefs all work a different shift. So the 3 shifts we have an assistant chief, and they are the shift commander. They run calls. They're up all night. They are line operational firemen. So to have them in the office helping and assisting with things, it's almost impossible because they're not here. They're going on calls. They're doing this. They're doing training. It's just a lot.
Thank you.
We have the similar setup with the chief of police and the deputy chief. I know Deputy Chief Comstock has specific delegated responsibilities, and the chief operates more administratively, correct?
If I may continue real quick,
You may.
to help wrap your head around it. Fire Chief Johnson's 3 assistant chiefs, if you were to take them to a bigger fire department, they'd be, as he wrote in his memo, a battalion chief. These are operational commanders. So in the police department, what we have that exists there is a sergeant. That's the highest street level rank that we have. So they are our operational commanders on a patrol shift. And they don't perform administrative duties at all. Their sole purpose is operations. Deputy Chief Comstock wears many hats, as do I, and we have to oversee those operational supervisors. But I think to help explain that, if you correlate it to the police department, that position of assistant chief is operating like a sergeant would at the police department in the field.
Alderman Sanders, did you have anything? You good? Okay. Alderwoman McClellan.
Did he will they get a sizable bump from pay? Was that
If the position was created and you went with the average between the assistant chief and the fire chief, it'd be about $1,000 bump per year.
so 1,000 per year?
It's not a lot.
Okay.
The difference between the assistant chief position and the fire chief position is only a couple $1,000.
All right, but that would be under when we do a new wage, the new raise thing, or they will be under the new raise.
That's really up to the council to decide on. Even creating the position is the proper thing to do right now.
Okay.
Okay. So I was just talking with the city clerk. So it sounds like we'd have to have city attorney draft an ordinance to create the position, and then that's what you would vote on. And then you obviously would still have the opportunity to vote on the budget as a whole to allocate the funds for that position if you chose to do so. Chief?
One more thing, Mayor. While Attorney Hoblet looks into that, I do believe that there might be an ordinance still in place that has 4 assistant chiefs. We just never filled it. And that's been I think that's been since 30 years ago. So that might need to be changed as well.
Mr. Hoblet?
What you're making reference to is 513 Assistant Fire Marshals. It's part of that old ancient 1960 code. There was, yes, 4 that was created. So
All right. Okay. So do you want to place the ordinance on the agenda for next week, or do you want to bring it back at a future cow? Future cow? Okay, we'll bring it back at a future cow.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Next item up is the annual salary increase policy for non-union employees. So this was a topic that we discussed in length. And last time we spoke about this, the council had a couple recommended changes for this. The first was to state that they would use, the policy would reference the CPI as determined by the Illinois Department of Revenue, plus 2%, and not to exceed a total of 5%. I can tell you that I did have conversations with at least Mr. Eimer, and he thought 5% was too high, and he thought that we should reduce that down. So take that into consideration as we're having this discussion. And then also, I think Mr. Hoblet, when he gets back, may have a recommendation about the compensation study. Sounds like there may be some reasons for the council to consider whether to include that or not in this policy. I think it needs to be in there. But the policy is presented in the packet based on your recommendation. Discussion? Mr. Bateman?
I had the same conversation with Mr. Eimer last Thursday evening. I did remind him that though he thinks 5% is too much, we currently have unions getting, one of the contracts was 5, 4, 4, and 4. This is not to exceed 5%. So if the CPI is 2 point something and you bump it 2%, it would be less than 5%. I was the one that suggested the max of 5. These are for the 8 non-union people. Unions have that written in their contract. But again, these 8 people do not get any of the other benefits that the unions do. One of the ones that Mr. Eimer was not aware of, which I found it odd because he worked for the street department, is longevity. We brought that up before at a previous discussion. Didn't seem like it garnered much traction. So I like the idea that the mayor came up with. But just in longevity at one of the unions, we got people going to get 18% pay raises this year. So I don't see how this council can sit here and balk over a possible 5% increase, because that is the max, a possible 5% increase, when we're giving out 10, 12, 14, 18% increases and not blinking an eye. That's always been my argument since I sat up here, is we discuss the non-union employees and nobody brings up what we're actually giving everybody else. So I think the max at 5% is fair, and using the CPI from Illinois, I think is a good idea. So that's where I stand on it.
Alderman Parrott?
So the other unions, and this is apples and oranges, as I think Ms. O'Donoghue had said before. So I don't think we should really compare, these unions to to the non-union folks. It's different. However, and I think you've mentioned it also, is perhaps the unions are getting too much, as I think is what you're saying. So perhaps that could be addressed at other times. What I don't see is if they're getting too much, then do we do the same by giving potentially 5% to the non-unions? Because some would say that's too much.
I don't think 5% of a low $40,000 salary. The Chuck can tell you the math. We're talking a drip in the bucket of the budget. So, you know,
But 10 years down the road, just think 10 years down the road.
Okay, 10 years down the road at 5%, they're still not making a whole lot of money. Minimum wage in this state is over $32,000 a year.
So what's
That's
not a lot of money? Because I'm going to pull it up. I'll pull it up to see what that dollar amount is.
Well, if we want to do the study, yes. If we have people coming in here at age 18, 19, 20 years old, and they stay till they're 70 or 60, everybody in this city is going to be making well over $100,000 a year. Okay? We got people going to be making way more than that. But history shows that those people don't stay that long. Again, that's rolling the dice. You're absolutely correct. That's rolling the dice that someone's going to come into an apartment and stay that length of time, because we do offer incentives to retire early. We've offered that to every one of the unions, which I believe in, because then that, just like the discussion we just had about the fire, is we would be promoting somebody who's had some years here, but we would be bringing someone in at way less salary. That's the gamble you have to take. That's the gamble I take every day when I do payroll at where I work, is where I start somebody and how many years I think I can get out of them. Mrs. Bateman's department is the only one that when the new elected official comes in, you take that gamble, and we brought this up, whether they have some kind of staying power, but you ended up having to hire three people. So when she leaves, are those people going to stay, or is the new elected official going to bring in their own people? So we have police is 50. They can retire at 50? 55. Fire is 50. Street and alley, we don't have that as an incentive. I just, again, looking at the budget as a whole, Steve, it's pennies on the budget, and to turn around and, you know, I know I'm going to hear this when I get home tonight, to compare what it's like trying to hire people today and keep good people, it's nearly impossible. I'm telling you. You know, it's hard to keep. David here, how often is the flag flying at the box factory now hiring? We have to make it competitive. We have to give them an incentive to stay. And if we're not going to do longevity, at least they know they should get the cost of living increase each year.
And keep in mind, the recommendation in the policy is not to give the employees each a 5% increase. It is to put a max on an increase of the budget for those departments. So if CPI is 2% one year, then they would only get 4%. They wouldn't get the maximum. 5 was just put in as a max to keep it from getting out of control. That's where I think the recommendation came from. Chief Meister, did you have something?
I did. And I appreciate what Alderman Bateman was talking about when he spoke about longevity, but I want to make it abundantly clear how longevity works. There are no union employees in the city of Lincoln getting an 18% raise this year. I understand where you're coming from, but hear me out real quick. So in the police department contract, every 2 years for the first 10, there's a 2% increase. That's not cumulative. So if I'm at 2 years and I get my 2% increase on my base rate, I don't get another 4 at year 4. I just get another 2. And then so on and so forth until the 12th year. After that, it's 1%. So that 18% raise isn't 18% of their base pay as it stands right now. It's 18% over however many years it takes to get to 18. So
It was described to me, and I'm looking at the union contract.
I've sat on
Six-
both.
16 years is a 14% increase, and this is on top of their 4% increase in their union contract.
Okay. It is on top of the 4% increase in their union contract. That is the contractual raise for that next year, right? But there's not an additional 14% on top of that 4. Those years have been earned all the way up to that 14%. You see where I'm coming from? No. Okay. I have to. No, it's fine. It's fine because I have to explain it to every new union police officer that we have because they're like, I didn't get the right raise. I should have this much more money. No. That's not the way it works. So it is. It's cumulative. So if you're at a 10% seniority or longevity rate right now, and you hit your next longevity step, you've got 12 years in, you get 2% of your base pay because you're already at 10. So it only takes 2 to make 12. So that officer's rate of pay goes up 2%, then his annual raise for whatever has been settled in the contract.
Treasurer Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things here. I just kind of going back to what Alderman Bateman said. With that 5% limit, though, it's going to just go back a few years here. We, as you know, for the last few years, we've had fixed dollar amounts, and the idea with that was to close the gap between the bargaining unit employees and the non-bargaining unit employees, and we've been able to do some of that. I think limiting it to 5% is too low. I think that limit should be higher, or perhaps there shouldn't be a limit on it. And you'd allow the department heads to. Well, let me.
Are you
Let Mr.
suggesting
Mr. Bateman.
to spend more money than I'm suggesting?
Mr.
Yes, this
Bateman,
may be the
let
first
Mr.
time.
Let Mr. Conzo finish, please. Mr. Conzo, the floor is yours.
That is really something when you think about it, but thank you. Anyway, if you continue to limit that at 5% or whatever percentage you decide on, we're going to be back to where we were when we started to address this problem by using fixed dollar amounts. Is that gap is going to continue to grow because 4% or 5% or whatever you happen to use of what somebody who's making $80,000 is going to get is going to be much less than 5% of what somebody who's making $40,000. So it's going to be far greater for the person making $80,000. So you're going to continue to increase that gap, which is how we ended up with the situation we have, which is what we've been trying to address for, I guess, 3 years now with the fixed dollar amount. So I would recommend not using that. If you have to put a percentage limit on it, I would place it higher than that, or perhaps not have any at all. The other thing you have to consider with that is sometimes cost of living index is sometimes it is 5%. Sometimes it's higher than 5%. So when you're limiting it to that, you may be limiting it to lower than what it is. The other thing is if you do this to address what Alderman Parrott was saying about what they're going to make in 20 years, everything is going to be more than 20 years. Their house is going to cost 3 times as much in 20 years. Their groceries are going to cost twice as much or 3 times. So you're going to see that. To project salary that somebody's going to make 20 years from now and saying that's outrageous amount of money is not accurate because you're not measuring that in comparison with what other things are going to cost. Just an example of that, when I started working with the state, I made what I considered to be it was a huge raise from what I was doing before I started working with the state. You know how much I made? $18,500 a year. Now, nobody would go to work full-time for $18,000 a year today, 18.5, or very few people would. So to say, well, in 20 years, they'll be making $120,000, that may be I don't think it'll be that high, but even if it is, you have to weigh that against what everything else is going to cost, and, what other things are going to happen. And there's no way to project that, which is why these things can be changed, from year to year, or re-examined at any time the council or some future council wishes to do that. Thank you.
Alderwoman McClellan.
Before that discussion, we were talking about, at one point, we were talking about salary caps, which would cure the problem of, we think they're gonna make, of them, if it's capped out at a certain dollar amount, then, which, IMRF, I think there's probably a lot of, people who do get capped out. So it's not something that's unusual, I don't think. But if you cap them out at a certain level, then you make it more palatable, I think, to be able to give them those raises, 5% every year or 4% or whatever. I think that, to me, it's easier if I know they're not going to end up with $120,000. Someone's not going to end up with $120,000 a year. I mean, at the library director got capped out. I mean, people get capped out. That's not unusual, I don't think so.
But
Then you end up with turnover. I have an employee that was capped out at his former job. And he worked 3 years at a cap, watching everybody else that was 8 years behind him catch up. Here he was management, and these young people coming in the door are catching up with him, and he was my age, still got a few years left to work. Why would he stay at that job? He's maxed out. He's watching people come up behind him faster than anything, and you cap somebody out. I don't believe in salary caps. You pay a person what they're worth. You give the department head a budgetary line item, you increase it that much, and you let each department head go to each employee and decide what that employee is worth to them, to try to keep from this yelling of the budget's getting out of hand, even though every time we talk about the budget, the general fund is increased. We have an auditor, Kevin doesn't know what he's talking about. That the person needs to be paid what they're worth. And to put caps on it, that is zero incentive to come to work to somewhere. I would like to come to work, but once you get to this point, we're not going to pay you any more money. That's not productive.
Mr. Hoblet.
So the council has I won't say a precedent, but you have in the past put caps. You said the person will enjoy a percentage raise, but they also cap it out. You did so with my contract. So in my contract on page 3, on section 4 for compensation, said that I will enjoy 4% increase each year. But it also states that if the council were to contemplate a higher raise, which hasn't happened, but but I would be capped out. I would be capped out at no more than what the city department heads enjoy. So in a way, my contract has a cap language in there, and we're just talking about raises here. Mr. Conzo raises a concern about what would happen, if there needs to be, if let's say what we kind of did these last few years needs to happen again. Well, this just contemplates raises. It doesn't contemplate equity adjustments. So you can have a raise that is, capped out at 5%, but if there needs to be an equity adjustment, you can add that on top. So that is a way to address that issue of being capped out at a raise.
Ms. McClellan, did you have something else? No, I'm done. Yeah. Alderwoman Rolfs.
Well, I thought when we were discussing that, we had decided that if we needed to raise that 5%, we would have that option. It isn't something that 5% was set in stone forever.
You can amend this policy as often as you like.
So to me, that's like, okay, if we have it set now and it would last for 2 years, and then we decide because of the economy, it needs to go to 6%, or if it's really, if we have to go downwards, I hope we don't, but, we would do it then. So I thought we had already kind of covered that. And I'm going to top you, Chuck. My starting salary at Lincoln Community High School was $6,600.
You win.
And I had a college degree, so it was like, okay, you know. But that's what I thought. And I think, I do have a question, Peggy. Let's exclude Ashley Metalco. How long has the shortest time employee been in your department? 5 years, 6 years?
How long is the shortest?
Most
How long
junior.
have the shortest, not in height?
Well, I mean, Angie Getchell, but she's part-time.
Okay, well, other than Angie,
Ashley came in 2017 when I came.
2017. So our employees are staying with us. It's because we have a good environment, but.
Yeah, and then 2 of them was there before I came by a year.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's not a huge amount of time, but they seem to be, from what I understand, fairly content from what they've said. So hopefully, Kevin, we wouldn't be losing that many people the way it goes.
But she just hit the nail on the head. The longest person there has only been there 7 years.
Chief, is that accurate?
What?
For your staff?
No,
Are you talking are you just talking?
He's talking
she was
clerk
just
staff.
talking. She was
Hers-
talking my
in
department.
Peggy's
Okay.
office, the longest is Julie Landers, correct?
Chris came first, or yeah, Julie then Chris.
They've only been, they were there
16.
right at a year before Peggy got there. So they've
Well,
only
so
been
like
there
what,
7.
8 years or something?
Yeah, just say 8 years.
Yeah, I keep in mind, the policy is better than what we've had up until now. We've had nothing. And I think that the policy will bring a little comfort to the employees who haven't had something for them to reference or fall back on that guides their salaries, right? And so, I mean, people will come and people will go. It's just the nature of it. They could have personal reasons for moving on, life reasons for moving on. But I think that this policy will help in the struggles that we've had, and it can always be modified. Keep that in mind. It can always be modified. Ms. McClellan.
I totally agree with you, what you said. At least we're saying you're gonna get a cost of living raise every year. You know what I mean? So that's a good hiring point. When you say we're gonna guarantee you a raise, no matter what the economy's doing, you're gonna get a raise. And I think that's a very helpful hiring point. Now, the other 2% or whatever, that's flexible, but I totally agree with what you say. They have some way to plan. You know, they're gonna get this, they can plan for the future, and I think it's a great way to go.
Ms. Rolfs.
Well, 5% of the salary this year is going to be different than 5%, the dollar amount of next year's, because you get that raise and then you get 5%, not on the year before, but on what you made just this previous year. So you do get a little bit more because you're building on that all of the time with the 5%.
And inflation could go down, who knows? It's gonna be bearable.
Mr. Conzo.
Just to reiterate this, if you do that and you have bargaining unit employees getting approximately the same raise, you are still in fact increasing the gap instead of closing that gap between what the bargaining unit and the non-bargaining unit employees make. And I think that's not advisable.
Well, I think that was why the compensation study was put in there, to make sure that we don't fall too far behind without something to guide us as we move forward.
So with that compensation study, my understanding would be they would look at like-minded jobs across like-minded communities and not look at necessarily, just our own unionized individuals.
Correct.
They could also look at the high school, right, and see what, or actually all of the teachers and what they make across, because I don't think, if it was apples to apples, it would probably be wiser not to take on over $100,000 in college debt to become a teacher, when they can, if we do this, where they can come here and make more than a teacher.
Yeah, and it'll never be apples to apples, because the positions that we have at the city, while they do similar work, every municipality is different. They have different, like, public utilities. Some people do more, some people do less, different types of work. So that's why people that are experts at that in those HR, like GovHR, they can do that because they have that information available to them. And keep in mind, they can give it to us, they can give us a range and give us an idea of where people fall within the range. Then the council can make that decision as to where they feel our employees should be. Mr. Bateman?
I'd like to put this on next week's voting agenda, and as Mrs. Rolfs pointed out and the mayor pointed out, if between now and next year we see we're falling behind, we can adjust the 5% cap. At least we have language in place where they know they're going to get an increase based on their work performance, based from their supervisor, versus having 8 people sit up here that turn over all the time discussing their wages and what they deserve. They know that they're working for that department head, and that department head determines their worth, not people who aren't working with them daily. That was what was most important to me, and the cap is what I thought was palatable. So that's why I'd like to put this on next week's voting agenda, get this passed, and then if we have to tweak it, we can. But let's see how it works.
Mr. Parrott?
I would like for the compensation study to occur in 2025 rather than in 2026. That way we can adjust if necessary for next year's budget.
Okay.
Because I think if we start in 2026, depending on when we start in 2026, it won't happen for the budget.
So we'll have to reach back out to the agency we did before, ask them for a quote, bring that to the council, and then put that in the budget.
I can do that.
Okay.
I still have the contact.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
if you want to get that amount and then get it to Mr. Conzo for the budget discussions. One adjustment that may need to make is in this document, it shows under the department heads, all of the positions, but it does not reference the new position that the chief just asked the council about. Would you like to put that position in here, or wait until you take action later and then we amend this at a later time?
Are we doing the ordinance next week?
It'll probably be a couple weeks.
As soon as the ordinance is done, I would say.
Put it in there. If we don't create the position, it just sits there in this ordinance.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Mr. Conzo?
For the city attorney, is this an ordinance then, or is this just a policy that you would?
This is just a policy. It's a written policy. I could do a resolution for it, to adopt it. That way it's categorized, doesn't get lost in some file. So it'll at least be, with our line of our resolution. So I can certainly do that.
Okay. So we'll place this on the regular agenda for next week then.
Just one more thing, Mayor.
Mr. Parrott?
When I think, I'll have to go back and look at it. When I reached out to GovHR, I believe it was only for the non-union folks to do the study.
Correct.
So if we're gonna do everyone, is that the intent?
This policy only covers the non-union.
Okay, so we're not going to do a salary study for all Lincoln employees.
I wouldn't recommend it at
Yeah.
this time because we have union negotiations coming up for the other.
So I just wanted to make sure.
We
Not
can
to
always
jump
come
out
back.
there, but that happens every time there's a union negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the union themselves do a salary comparable for all union employees, at least for my department.
All right. Mr. Hoblet, I'll send you some corrections, just a few tweaks, and then I'll turn it over to you from there. Okay. Before we get to announcements, there's a walk-on topic that we have this evening, and normally we don't like to do this, but there's a packet on your desk that Mr. Bounds put down for the community solar, which we've discussed. There has come a need for us to construct an access ramp to that property so that they have laydown areas to exit off of Kickapoo Street, and then the semis can navigate a turnaround and lay the materials down there. It'll also help with the future maintenance of that. What this will do, and I'll let Mr. Bounds explain it in further detail, but what it will do is it keeps us operating on our property and not having to have easements from other property owners to access our property. So it just makes it cleaner for everybody that owns property out in that particular area. But Mr. Bounds, anything to elaborate?
So as Mayor Welch said, access is the high degree of burden here. We have no access to the northern portion of the parcel that we swapped with Kent Cross to build the original solar distribution system. So this is the community solar. This is the one that the city will be able to take direct advantage of, specifically for city buildings, to get you guys on the same 4 cents a kilowatt hour rate that we pay, as opposed to the aggregate rate of 7.1 cents per kilowatt. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a 50% savings on the electrical, because we still have the distribution charges that are static from Ameren that we can't get away from. So this road and turnabout coming off Kickapoo is, if you guys can take a look at the second picture in the packet here, this is going to be a rough outline of where this access will come off Kickapoo, come across that giant levee where the Sherman Street sewer runs underneath that you've all seen on Kickapoo Street. And they will be able to come off Kickapoo here, go down the short side, and then back up the long side to empty their trucks, the panels that come in, all the infrastructure that's got to be built to put this up. The third sheet you'll see in here is a rough rendition from Keystone Power Holdings, who we have contracted for with this, and that's one of their pieces of submission to Ameren for design, but just to give you a rough layout of what it's going to be. So we do not currently have a hard bid in hand. This has been a very tight turnaround because of their build schedule is what it's going to amount to. I believe Alderman Bateman, Mayor Welch, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at an April build-out, assuming we receive final approval from Ameren on design.
That's correct.
So this is a short turnaround time. We don't have that direct bid. We do have a verbal from one person that we have spoken to right now. We are going to be soliciting another bid as well, but we have nothing hard in hand. So the request for you all tonight for next week's agenda would be to approve the expenditure of up to $60,000, not exceeding that. That would come out of the sewer construction fund. The reason we have chosen this mechanism to fund it, and Treasurer Conzo, please step in here if you want to elaborate, but the sewer rebate program that we set aside $250,000 with to help the residents, we haven't had as much uptake from the residents on that program as we would like. So we've got some free board in there. We've got roughly 2 months and 17 days till that program has to be reauthorized by council, and I plan on having a discussion with you guys there to augment that program to help the uptake. But all in all, asking for a not to exceed price of $60,000, and for the mayor to be able to select the lowest bids from the bids that are solicited. Because of the timeliness of that, that's why it's being presented in this manner. I apologize for this issue not being identified sooner. When we knew about it, that's when you guys are knowing about it.
Alderwoman Rolfs and then Alderman Bateman.
But that is our board now. We didn't have all those houses before, but it has been. So do we have to notify all of those residents that this is happening, or is it just something that we do and?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Alderman Wall.
Okay, we're going to put it looks like from the map.
Yep.
That we're putting a new exit off of Kickapoo.
Correct.
And since we have houses, I mean, I know most of those are businesses right across them, but we also have residents that aren't too far. do they have to be notified that we are doing this, or are we okay not notifying
I
them?
do not believe that is a requirement. I would defer to City Attorney Hoblet if he's aware of any statutory notification process that we should be participating in for that.
The amount, did you mention an amount of money about the residents just a minute ago?
No,
Okay.
Nothing to do with residents.
Okay.
So if you go drive down there, that levee is going to obstruct the view from the majority of this for all of those residents. It's not something they're going to see other than the initial approach up on Kickapoo. So right where the road either narrows up or widens out depending on perspective or direction of travel, that's where we're going to be exiting right there, because there is a partial curb entrance that will just require minimum modification to be applicable for what we're trying to do.
Okay, so it won't have any impact on them, the residents at all, or the businesses?
I can't control how a person feels about something. In my opinion, it will not affect a resident, but I can't say that there wouldn't be a complaint. You know, we can't please everyone, but the goal here is definitely not to alienate residents. That's absolutely not the goal.
Mr. Landers?
Yeah, there wouldn't be any environmental concerns to the residents there, or any fluctuation to the way they live their daily lives. And then also another point that I'd like to make, this, as far as the activity on this roadway, or this ramp and turnabout is going to be limited to construction. And then after the construction is done, then it's just going to be basically a maintenance road, so it's not going to see a lot of traffic, I would assume.
That is,
Yes.
that is correct. After construction, it will only be access to the site for Keystone to actually maintain the panels, whether they've got to replace panels, go out there, do a cleaning because efficiency is dropped, XYZ reasons that they have, but it would be maintenance. It would also not be accessible to the public. We have talked about putting a guardrail or a gate of some sort off the exit to Kickapoo. So I don't foresee this impacting residents outside of the construction timeline just because you're going to have added traffic down there during the construction period.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bateman?
So, just to reiterate, since I'm the one that, the alderman that works with the solar company and tries to keep everybody moving, is that where the current is, we have to have easements with the people that live out on that road, and there is zero access to this property from our own property. And it was just trying to work things out. It was just discussed, kind of like building the bridge at the sewer plant. It was just discussed that it would be much easier for us to build a gravel road to access our own property, whether we're building a solar farm or whatever we would want to do with it. We have zero access to that property for us from our property. So simplest way is just to, if you go out there, Mrs. Rolfs, where Kickapoo Street is narrow across from the old Sharon's Radiator, if you're coming north up that hill, on that side it bumps in. That's where the curb would be cut there at that bump. So it wouldn't affect any residents whatsoever, but then they would just go across down the levee, down the ramp we're going to build onto that property. And as Walt said, during construction, there'll be trucks coming in and out of there, basically flatbeds with the solar panels on and stuff. But once construction is over, the property would sit there and it would just be the occasional maintenance person or Ameren or somebody going down there to do some work. And we would put a gate at the top of that ramp so that people that want to investigate won't go down that ramp to end up down there in the solar farm. But it is our 20 acres and we need to be able to access it.
Yeah, we had explored this option when the first solar farm was going up, and we ultimately didn't feel we needed it. But with this new community solar farm going in, and the area and the acreage, as you see in this map, that it's going to encompass, this entrance just makes more sense for the long term.
We'll recoup the money in literally months. Once the solar is up and running, the savings to our power bills for the rest of the buildings in the city will recoup this $60,000 quickly.
And that brings up a question. That solar farm that's there, and I guess a community one, that will all serve the people in Lincoln? Businesses and residents, or?
Some residents will be able to take advantage of that based on capacity of the solar farm. We can get you more details on that at a later time, but that is the idea.
City gets to, according to Keystone, the city gets to use 40% of what the power is produced from that solar farm. And Andrew and the people at Keystone worked the numbers, and then as Andrew said, that would cut what we're currently paying per kilowatt hour. It would basically cut that in half. We still have the distribution. If you look at your Silco bill, there's a big chunk of your Silco bill that's the distribution part. Not a lot of it is what you actually use.
Is that the same thing as an Ameren bill?
Yeah, same thing. But we are allowed to, the city is allowed to pull 40% of the energy produced. That would cut our energy and cost. Then there's also the fact that they are leasing the land from us. I don't, Mrs. Bateman might be able to answer what those, I think it's $1,100 an acre, something like that, is what they're leasing the land from us to build this on. So it's a significant savings to the city in the long run. And like I said, this $60,000 will recoup that in mere months once the power is up and running.
Ms. McClellan and then Mr. Parrott.
I just had a quick question about the money. Is that something that can just be transferred, or do we need to vote on that, or that's just a?
The money was already approved in that line item, the $250,000 for the sewer rebate program.
Thanks.
Mr. Parrott.
Yeah, just two things. I know that we're leasing it, but we also we're renting it out for crop, right?
No, once basically he has farmed his last.
No, but before, I mean, it's almost an apple to apple for whatever they're paying per acre.
We were doing cash rent.
Yeah, we were doing cash rent, so that's not there's not much of a savings there. But what I would be interested in is getting an actual. We've had this for how long, Andrew? The
solar
in production out there
being up, we're getting close to 2 years.
2 years. Could we actually get some numbers on actual savings? Is that possible? Because I know we talk about 40%, but let's get some actual numbers as far as to what we would have to what we're saying we're saving, just to kind of so the public can see how much money that we're actually saving rather than just talking about percentages.
No, that's fair. I want to polish up the 40% number here right real quick though. So in the contract, we can request reservation up to 40% of the generation capacity. Because net metering is no longer truly a thing in the state of Illinois since January 1st, 2025. We can't take, it's not as advantageous to the city as when we did it for sewer. We should not... We've got a call scheduled with them or are attempting to set up a call about the 40%. We believe 15% of the generation capacity will cover the city's needs. So outside of the sewer department's usage, the other departments that are represented here, as well as the front of the table up there, are roughly 660 to 670,000 kilowatts a year. 15% of the generation capacity should be able to cover that. Now, I don't want to expand on that very much more until we have that conversation with Keystone, because there is a mechanism we're going to be seeking with them, basically a balancing act to cover future needs growth if that were to ever happen for city buildings. And that way we're not stuck with the initial number we pick for the term, which I believe is 25 years, the same as the solar. To get back to your other question, though, on savings, yes, we can do that. What you have to remember is I don't want to say it's difficult to quantify. It's difficult to get everything to line up. So we have an Ameren charge for distribution. We have AEP through electrical aggregation. And we have Keystone Power Holdings that does generation as well that we pay for. None of those bills line up. When the credits get applied to the AEP bill and Ameren bill from the KPH generation, the AEP bill, I believe the most recent one we have, Clerk Bateman, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe our most recent one that we received is October. It's typically arrears by 3 months that we're receiving it. So can we do that? Yes, that is something I believe that we can produce for the council. Would ask for some latitude and what kind of time frame since start a system.
I would just say whenever we can get the most accurate information for as long as we can go back, you know, because I know we talk like when these new projects come out, I know Kevin's mentioned 40%, but you're saying it's not actually 40%. And so when we start approving things, we see some numbers, but really we shouldn't expect, you know, like a 40% because you're just saying it wasn't 40%. So,
No.
so I'm just saying so that we can make better decisions, because I'm hearing right now that solar is not, you know, what it's made out to be, you know, and people aren't, you know, saving like they think that they're going to be saving. And I just want to make sure if we do any more of these solar fields that benefit the city or whatever, and I don't anticipate that, but that we actually have some real numbers that we can say, yeah, that's not worth it for us, especially if the people aren't liking the way that they look aesthetically and such. And so, you know, for a few $1,000s, if that's what we're saving, perhaps let's not do it, right?
No, I can definitely work on that for you. Just remember that the distribution portion of your bills, every single person in this room that's covered under an Ameren agreement, or even if that's not who your electrical generator is, you're still paying Ameren for the distribution. They run all distribution. To my knowledge, Ameren doesn't produce 1 watt of power. They purchase everything, resell it to you, and that's part of the reason that the city moves forward with aggregation.
And that's why I don't really care about distribution. I just want to know what's it saving us bottom line.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can get that. For the purposes of right now, the way to look at it would be that generation cost as the aggregate, which is cheaper than the market rate here in Lincoln at 7.1 cents per kilowatt hour, I believe. We pay 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And it goes through a bill credit cycle is what it does. So even when solar's not producing energy at night, doesn't mean that you're paying a higher rate at that time because of the offset credit.
Sure. Yeah, because, you know, if we can, you know, forecast out, if we saved $20,000 over the last 2 years or whatever, I don't know, you know, in 25 years, I mean, that's a considerable, you know, savings.
Agreed.
Andrew and I was talking today. It is difficult to figure. Basically, on the way home, we were discussing how to bring this up in front of the council, and he come up with the idea of the best way to say it is, currently you and I are paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour. When this is all up and running, we should be paying it would come out to 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's why basically trying to half of the
Sure.
power.
So over the last 18 months or whatever it is, how many kilowatts did we use over those 18 months? And then you can figure out if it's 3.5 cents versus the 7 cents. You can easily figure out like what the savings was.
Currently, right now, we're waiting on Silco again because the power plant out there was struck by lightning. So now the solar panels are only gathering sun in the morning because they no longer turn.
That's going to happen probably in the next 25 years, maybe a few more times.
Agreed. It's a disagreement between Keystone and Ameren at this point. One other thing that was said that I think we need to clarify, Alderman Parrott, I think it was your comment, apples to apples on the farm rent to the lease, absolutely not comparable.
Okay.
We were less than just a couple $100.
Treasurer Conzo,
Like next to nothing.
happen to recall the value of the lease when it was being leased to, I believe we were in the neighborhood of $5,400
Yeah, that sounds about right. And it varied from year to year.
based
too.
on crop yield.
Right.
And then what they
Right.
Okay.
So
All right.
5,400 on a 40-acre parcel, and this is going to be, I believe Alderman Bateman is correct, 1,100 per acre for a roughly 20-acre site. So your
Okay.
lease pay, I mean, we're
So
400%.
So include that. Then I guess you can include that in the savings as well too when you come up when you bring the figure.
Okay.
So really, Steve, you just want to see the savings,
I just want to see savings.
right? So rather than get into all, and you can break it down as far as you want, Andrew, but I think by the time you start talking about the credits and how they're applied and all that, it could get we could get lost in the details. Ultimately, we just want to know, by putting that solar in, how much money have we saved? So we can
Go back on your old Ameren bills versus the last couple years Ameren bills. But then the problem is we've upgraded the sewer, as you said on the way home. The sewer plant uses more power than every building in the city combined.
I use at the sewer plant in roughly 45 days what every other city building uses in 365.
constantly
The
running.
disparity there it's huge.
I mean, it's a savings. It's just going to take him a while to generate a number, an accurate number. I think some of the stuff we've installed, I'm assuming, runs more efficient. So we might be having some savings there on new equipment that we installed. So
You're going to have overlap on that, and that we can't boil it down to a granular level like that. Alderman Parrott, what you said about comparing KWHR usage, I think that is probably the easiest way to tackle that boil out a lot of the intrinsic issues being experienced, whether it's a flow and loading issue. I use more electricity every time it rains. Got to pump more water.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to use more electricity. You're going to have the outages or whatever. I mean, we know how much electricity we used. We know what the savings is, for the 15% or whatever, what we're paying per kilowatt per hour versus what we would have paid, before. That's all we need.
That's doable.
Thank you.
Okay. So, for this request, is the council okay placing this on the regular agenda for next week? Okay. And Andrew, do you need to get with John on anything for this?
No, just to reiterate the request, it's going to be a not to exceed 60,000, and for Mayor Welch to accept the lowest bid once we have hard copy in hand.
And we'll follow the same practices we do for all other bidding processes. Okay. I think that brings us down to announcements. Does anybody got an announcement? Alderman Parrott and then Alderwoman Rolfs.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the Lincoln wrestling team. They won the regional over in Bloomington. Happened to be over there and watched them this past Saturday. Well, you keep me straight here. Sectionals is at Lincoln High School this coming Friday and Saturday.
Yes, Lincoln will host the individual sexual tournament.
That's a big honor, and it's going to be,
Absolutely.
for any businesses are in town, any hotels, there's going to be, high schoolers all over the city here, and parents and family members as well.
They hosted it a few years ago. I can't remember how long ago it's been, but it's been 4 years already. And then they will also host the dual team meets on Tuesday night of next week. So,
Very
and
good.
if they win that meet, then they'll advance to the state finals for the.
Yeah, so come out and watch Lincoln wrestling this weekend. It's going to be really good.
Ms. Rolfs, did you have an announcement?
Well, it's kind of an announcement, but it's kind of a question also at the same time. This is in regards to a possible code violation, and I kind of wanted to talk about that. That deals with the special committees that we have. And in our ordinance, under committees of the whole special committee, this is C2, it says special committees, the mayor shall appoint the members of all special committees in the absence of specific directions of the city council, and shall designate the chair thereof. Every special committee shall consist of no less than 3 members. And I think we've had committees with just 2 people on it. So I wasn't sure if that puts us in violation if we don't have 3 members on our committee.
What is the date of that ordinance?
2013.
Okay. Do you have specific violations that you're raising?
I'm sorry.
Do you have specific violations that you're raising?
Well, if we appoint a committee, let's say the recent committee for, I think that has Dave and Wanda on it, It says, I think that's only 2.
Does that say
But there
council
shall have
members?
no less than 3, so we should have 3 on that committee.
Okay, we can add another person to it.
So we did that before.
Correct.
If you have three aldermen in the committee, you have to have a public meeting. You just can't just meet it.
Well, I'm just going by what the ordinance is. So I said we either
Yeah, it
adjust
doesn't say
the
council,
ordinance
though. It
or.
just
It just says 3 members.
That's not a
they have
relevant
all-
designation.
Mr. Hoblet,
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor. Not to cut you off, but it's every committee and commission in the city has to adhere to the Open Meetings Act, regardless of whether or not there's 3 aldermen on there. So, like say the economic development, if there's only 2, like every member on there is subject to those rules, and they could not discuss. Like I'm on that committee, I can't not discuss the contents of those meetings, whatnot. Like say with more than 2 or 3 of the members of those boards, of that board, even though some of them might be not city council members. In regards to the special committee, to me, kind of, what do we quantify as a special committee? Because that's kind of nebulous. Is that any and all committees that's not the city council? Is that, is it like a special purpose? Like this is where like the mayor wants to appoint a committee for the purpose of looking into the one specific issue, or let's say something of that nature. In which case, I guess it would trigger the three aldermen or alderwomen. But it doesn't really say as to what constitutes a special committee. I would think it's for one specific purpose. I would think that would be the intent, but I would have to pull the ordinance and the minutes from when this meeting happened to see what their intent was when they passed that.
well, that would be my question. Mr. Sanders, Ms. O'Donohue, have you met as a ethics committee or commission? So there has been no meetings. The purpose of putting that particular one together was that we had an issue on the council, which I think everybody's aware of, and I felt it was appropriate that I removed myself from that discussion, and I simply put that in the hands of those 2 council members. Mr. Bateman.
Yeah, but didn't you just read it has to have 3 people,
Yeah, no less than 3 people.
but it doesn't say 3 aldermen.
No,
So
it doesn't.
so we're not violating any ordinance. It sounds like you're suggesting there's a violation of an ordinance. If
Well, I'm questioning.
if-
When it says that,
I'm questioning whether I'm saying I don't feel that there's a violation of any ordinance because the Parks Committee that I sat on when it met, it was myself, Sam Downs and Ashley Metelko.
Mr. Hopel.
There's 3 members to a committee. It's just the ordinance doesn't say it has to be alderpersons. The problem if you put 3 alderpersons is it's going to greatly increase the budget because then you get pay involved and minutes and everything else. So
well,
if we're trying to be frugal here,
This is an ordinance.
if we're trying to be frugal, we need to be frugal.
And to be clear, I'm talking more recent, like the Strategic Planning Committee. There are only 2 people on that, right? Now, again.
Did I state that there was a committee? I don't believe I stated that there was a committee for that. I didn't form a committee for strategic planning.
Well,
These 2 council members are working on that, but I didn't form a committee or commission for that.
Well, let's just say that in the public, it seems that to be, that is the committee for the strategic planning. So I'm just trying to clarify this, because as I interpret this, that no matter what we set up, where there are people involved, there should be more than 2.
Mr. Hoblet.
If my interpretation is wrong, that's fine. I just want it clarified so that we're not in violation of the code.
I just wanted to
Mr. Hoblet.
clarify my previous statement. Mr. Bateman's read on the city code is accurate. It's not 3 aldermen or 3 alderwomen. It's just 3 members. Again, without specific direction from the city council. So, again, as to what actually constitutes a special committee or whether or not a special committee even gets formed, is up for interpretation. So,
Would you recommend clarifying that then?
if you're asking whether or not the lawyer recommends clarification, I mean, my answer is always going to be yes. But again, it already could quite possibly have been clarified at the time from which it was passed. Within those minutes, we would just need to look back to see what the legislative intent was, and if they didn't, then if the council wants to, we can certainly outline that a little bit more.
When did you
So is
say
there
that
a
was?
question about whether or not there is such a thing as special committees? I mean, that's what this headline is, special committees. Again, yeah, it's not clear as to what that entails.
Right, Mr. Rolfs, I'm not going to be able to provide an answer with you tonight until I see the minutes and the ordinance that was previously passed.
Thank you.
Ms. Bateman, did you have an announcement?
Oh, yeah. We're wrapping up the annual paying for your sewer. You got till the 20th, for anybody out there that hasn't done it yet. As of the end of the day on 2/10, was that yesterday? We've done 663 accounts in the amount of $294,796.91 so far.
That's good. That's great.
Peggy, do you remember how many we had last year?
I think she said around 1,400. So we're kind of down.
Yeah.
I'm thinking she said 1,400. Yeah, I mean, we got a week and a half,
Thank you.
even though there were so many on Monday. So it's the 20th is the deadline on that. So if you come in on the 21st, you're out of luck.
Okay. Chief Johnson.
My only announcement, you all know, it came to my attention there might be an issue with the elevator. I learned that from everyone in this room. So here in a second, I'm going to check the conditions of the stairs that they're working on now. Either way, I'm going to have the on-duty shift come down and escort everyone down the stairs, either this or the back stairs through the dormitory. And then anyone who wants to ride the elevator, I'll actually get on it with them.
I thought we were going to take the pole down.
If insurance would allow that, you're more than welcome to it.
Mr. Bateman.
So as you enter the council chambers tonight, if you didn't, on your way out, I thank the fire chief. If you'll notice, there's a new display next to the elevator. It is absolutely 100% why I will always push as an alderman in the city of Lincoln that this remain the oldest working firehouse in the state of Illinois. That is a very good display. I don't know, I'm amazed that some of that stuff didn't get squirreled away somewhere, unless it was kept in Chuck's office, then we would know it's always been there. But lost in translation, but I mean, there's awards out there from the early 1900s. There's two very hard-working fire people, animals in that picture that hold the distinction of a world record from the city of Lincoln. Please take your time and look at it and read it. That was amazing. Thank you very much for finding that and creating that display. I think it's very important that the citizens get to see stuff like that.
Chief.
And I would have to say that the credit goes to the shift firemen, because I told them during this remodel, I wanted some of the older stuff and the nicer stuff out here so more of the public could see it. I believe that was Captain Williams who did that display. But the rest of the hallway, they're working on updating that with better stuff. But we do have a lot of history in this building, and we absolutely like having that on display. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with an announcement? Chief, did you want to mention the DARE training going on?
Sure. If you guys have noticed, if you traveled up and down Fifth Street yesterday or today, our parking lot is completely full. We have 20 officers attending our 2-week DARE officer training program. We have several from Illinois, all around the state, and then we have officers from Michigan, Indiana, Virginia, Iowa, and then some of the mentors. So there's 5 mentors that teach this course for the DARE officer recruits, and they've traveled from all over as well to live with us here in Lincoln for 2 weeks. So we're happy to have them. This is, I think it's year 6. It started a little before I got into administration, but so I don't have an accurate number, but I think off the top of my head it's year 6 for our DARE officer training program. So if you see a unfamiliar police officer in the community, it's probably one of our DARE officer trainees.
And we just open up our facility, or we don't charge anything like that.
No,
right?
there's no charge. There is a charge to the agencies who send their officers through DARE training, but that goes to DARE, not to the Lincoln Police Department. But these folks live with us for 2 weeks, so they're staying in our hotels.
Awesome.
They're eating at our restaurants and shopping at our grocery stores. So we're happy to have them in town, not just for that reason, obviously, but happy to host them.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other announcements this evening? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Alderman Bateman made the motion. Alderwoman McClellan second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? This meeting is adjourned at 7:42 p.m.
Check those stairs immediately. I need to go check these stairs immediately.